Yes! Yes! Let's go! Hello?
Hello, table for one?
No, I'm meeting someone here. Jasmine? Who the fuck is this? What are you doing here? How could you do this to me?
What?
Sorry, bro. You're just not up to the boots like I am.
I hate you. I'm looking for something strong, something to numb the pain.
You're not a cop, are you? If you are, you have to tell me. And I'll know if you're lying.
Do I look like a cop to you? Give me the goddamn booch.
Some heavy shit. Be careful. Don't tell anybody about this. You got that?
Yeah. Come on. Pick up. Ooh. Jared? I need to get her back, man. I need to make something. Something really good. Bucha.
So, we need to make kombucha. How do you make kombucha? You might be asking. Well, how about let's slow down for a minute, okay? So we need to make a SCOBY first. So, what you're gonna need to make a SCOBY is 4 simple ingredients. Water, tea, sugar, and somebody's already made kombucha. We're making our SCOBY in a 2-liter jar, so we'll be using measurements made for that amount of booch. So, once you've gathered all your ingredients, start by boiling 7 cups of water. Once boiled, remove from the element and add half a cup of sugar. Make sure to stir it until it's fully dissolved. Then, add 4 tea bags of your choice to the mixture and let the tea steep until the water is at room temperature. Add your tea to the container that you'll be using to make kombucha. Then, add 1 cup of whoever's kombucha you've already stolen to finish it off. Once you've finished it, make sure you cover the top of the container with a breathable cloth because your SCOBY needs to breathe. Then, all you have to do is wait.
Casey.
Hello? I've collected the data.
And?
I don't just know Swampbucha. I can think like Swampbucha.
Anyways, just come meet me later and we'll talk about it.
Okay.
Okay. Bye.
Alright. So tell me how it works.
First, let's quickly clarify what SCOBY means and what's in a SCOBY. SCOBY, or symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast, is what's responsible for the chemical reactions being carried out in our kombucha. Our SCOBY is made up of just 2 simple ingredients: acetic acid bacteria and yeast. The sucrose in our tea is broken down in water and split into fructose and glucose by an invertase, which is an enzyme produced by the yeast. Then, fructose is metabolized by the yeast into 2-ethanol and 2-carbon dioxide. So now that our sugars are broken down, let's return to our SCOBY. The AAB, acetic acid bacteria, mentioned earlier consists of 2 separate bacteria, Gluconobacter and Acetobacter. These 2 bacteria feed on fructose and glucose. The Gluconobacter performs 2 separate actions. First, it removes 1 hydrogen and 1 oxygen from carbon number 1 of the first glucose molecule. Then it removes 1 hydrogen from carbon number 4 of the second glucose molecule, creating a chain of glycosidic bonds. This is the film formed in kombucha known as cellulose, and it creates H2O as a byproduct. This film is used as a protective layer for the SCOBY and commonly forms on the top of the kombucha to pull oxygen. Secondly, the Gluconobacter oxidizes the glucose and creates gluconolactone and hydrogen peroxide. Now, to prevent the newly formed hydrogen peroxide from killing the SCOBY, the Gluconobacter produces an enzyme called catalase, which decomposes the 2-hydrogen peroxide into 2 oxygen and 2 water. The gluconolactone, upon being formed, spontaneously mixes with the solution and creates gluconic acid. The Acetobacter metabolizes the ethanol and it begins to oxidize into acetic acid and generates H2O as a byproduct. This contributes to the vinegary taste of kombucha. And so, pretty much, yeah, that's how you... Casey? Where'd you go, dude?
The Big Bucha Batch.
Science, am I right? I needed to booch myself out of that one. Okay, anyways, I was thinking that with the current jars we bought for both fermentation processes, we wouldn't have enough volume to supply for our audience members, or ourselves of course. If you are not wondering what those jars were, that sucks. Listen anyways. The first jars I bought was a set of 3 2.3 liter glass vessels and were for aerobic fermentation. In order to do aerobic fermentation, your jar's opening must be close to the same circumference as the rest of the jar. This is because when you're growing a SCOBY, it spreads across 100% of your tea's surface area, and there's no way you can get the SCOBY out of a hole that is too small. The jars we bought actually have a clamped silicone sealed lid, and the only thing stopping you from swapping your SCOBY and 1/3 of the booch to a different jar would be how well it's pressure rated. Because anaerobic fermenting traps gases and self-carbonates, I have heard many stories of jars exploding from the built-up CO2. So without taking any chances, I bought 6 1-liter Gulch bottles that have swing top stopper lids and a high pressure rating. Even with this extra precaution, you are still advised to burp the booch every now and then. After acquiring 2 7-gallon pressure-rated big beefy booch vessels, I went to work. The reason for having 2 of them is because a SCOBY is a living, breathing culture that requires oxygen at all times. I now have the luxury of keeping the tea in the same jar the whole time, but that means the jar spends a part of its life sealed up for second fermentation, and now you need a second jar to transfer the SCOBY in so that its village is never filled with sadness, and it's always getting a healthy amount of O2. You want to leave around 2 gallons of headspace in the jar to accommodate for gas buildup and the amount of fruit or substance you put in later. For my first big Bucha batch, my problem was finding good water. You must stray away from tap water, as chlorine kills bacteria and sulfur reportedly makes kombucha smell like rotten eggs. All the water places were closed, but I found 2 giant green jugs of water at Canadian Tire for only $12. I strongly recommend saving time by getting the biggest possible pot you can, because I could only boil 2.5 gallons at a time, which means I had to do this process twice. Once the water boiled down, a general rule that our mentor told us was to use 3 to 4 cups of sugar per gallon, which at first looks like a disgusting amount of sugar, but you have to remember that the natural yeast from the tea eats it all up. The small batch was really easy because we just used pre-portioned tea bags, but when you're dealing with the 400 grams of tea that we need, that gets a bit unmanageable, so I had to get crafty. I went to my local dollar store and picked up some leggings, and the idea behind that was to stuff tea where your legs would normally go, and then tie a knot. This in theory would create a netting that only flavor can pass through, with no tea particles either. It was all working out until after the recommended 15-minute steeping time, when I was able to see a giant cloud of extremely fine tea particles floating in my sugar tea. I mitigated a large portion of this issue by letting the tea particles settle near the bottom, and then once it cooled down, I slowly poured my tea into the other jar, which had about 1/3 to 1/4 kombucha starter tea already in it, and a happy little SCOBY. And then I just slowly poured it until most of the settlement on the bottom was left behind. When picking a tea to grow or feed a SCOBY with, you can pick almost anything, but please make sure the tea you choose contains compatible rhizomes, because you could be hurting your SCOBY's growth. Green, black, white, and oolong are the most common choices. I picked a half and half of green and black, as black teas specifically contain the most nutrients for a SCOBY, and I hear good things about both in regards to how they affect the taste. Once my sugar tea was done, it's ready to ferment. Leave the lid off and let the SCOBY do its magic for 2 weeks. Maybe less, maybe more. We did 21 days or something crazy, but it depends on the size of your SCOBY and the fact that everyone also has their own preferences and taste. If you've never had a kombucha before, I'd recommend buying a bottle at a market just so that you get an idea of what it should taste like. If you want it more bitter or vinegary, brew it longer. If you want less of the sugar eaten for a sweeter drink, push it into second ferment sooner by moving the SCOBY and 1/4 starter tea into a second jar, and then you have a whole new jar to make another tea for it again. If you want to keep the loop going, of course. It's important to make a new batch for your SCOBY at least every month, or it will die in a very sad and hungry way. And seal the jar that doesn't have your SCOBY. Be mindful that kombucha is a goldmine for flies, and you must protect the bucha with a breathable material like certain fabrics, but don't use paper products such as coffee filters or paper towel, as they are very unreliable, and do not use cheesecloths either, as the thread count is too low. You want a nice reusable fabric with a higher thread count, and to strap it around the lip of the jar with a strap or tight rubber bands, just to make sure that there's no alternative way flies can get in.
Casey? Where did you go, dude? Oh, Casey! There you are. Where did you go, dude? I was trying to tell you about the bucha. I got bored, sorry. Yeah, well, I was kind of leading up to saying, I don't think we're gonna have enough, I don't think that's gonna cut it what we got, so. Well. Where did you get all that bucha? Well.
On the Jeremy Kombucha, motherfucker.
So, he wants to know how I got this much booch, eh? Well, Jared and I were eager to take our connections to a deeper level. It was just another Pulsin' Wednesday, and the perfect time to window shop local businesses, sniff around for some booch, ask about their suppliers, and hit up Martin's Brew Pub to inquire about the elusive underground kombucha business just below their feet. Unfortunately, the lovely lady at Martin's could not contact the business owner, and our dreams to learn about their succulent booch came to an end. I thought we were cooked, but she gave us some contact information to a local kombucha supplier in Kelowna. As the owner of Swampbucha Kombucha, Jeremy impressively manages, operates, brews, and distributes his bucha with no help. We called him up, he gave us his email, I wrote up a summary of how and why we want to make Swampbucha, hoping for the best. And we got an in-person tour of his facility, a great view of all his giant vessels, all of the smells, his labeling machine, his plethora of pretty product bottles with a variety of flavors, along with really valuable insights on anything from the heat threshold of a plant's essence, measurements and ratios, brewing times, scientific understandings, tea drying, the history of his business, all the way to how cute and rare his twin baby cows were. Jeremy's heartwarming kindness and his passion for helping others led to us receiving a free SCOBY, a generous amount of starter tea, cloth, custom-made fermenting straps, and sold us 2 pressure-rated 7-gallon fermenting jars off of him, which aren't even on the market anymore. Thanks to Jeremy from Swampbucha Kombucha getting the ball rolling that much faster, our time crunch to cram all of this fermenting time inside our approaching due date was made possible. Our journey with Jeremy hasn't ended. He has been a continuous supporter of this project from day one and has helped us get through so many problems through text. So, to answer the question, Jeremy is how I got all this booch.
Oh yeah, I remember that. I was there for that, yeah. So, finally, we've made it to the second fermentation. In this process, you can add anything from fruits to vegetables, but for this booch, we're going to be doing something a little different. We need to put the swamp in Swampbucha. And what's swampier than cattails? To balance out the flavor of our cattails, we're going to add strawberries to create a refreshing yet interesting concoction. And when we're talking about harvesting cattails, we're not talking about those delicious swamp dogs growing up top on the cattails. We're talking about those juicy stalks. So now we just need to get some. We went down to Marshall Fields to harvest our cattails. Finding them was pretty easy because we're literally in the marsh. Our problem was that the good cattails were just sitting across the stream from us, so we had to scale the sides of the river to scrounge up what little we could. We managed to get our hands on some waders later on and crossed the stream to get our hands on the juicier, bigger cattails. We made sure to harvest the green stalks because they've got the flavor and crunch we're looking for, and the cattails have a suspiciously similar flavor and smell to cucumbers with a celery-like texture. Now that we've harvested our cattails, we take them back to home base and rinse them off, strip off the extra leaves and cut them down into 4-inch chunks so we can freeze them and kill all the germs. Once our cattails froze for a day, we went to the store to get our strawberries. We calculated we'd need about 1,200 grams of strawberries to get a good enough flavor you could actually taste it. So we got 2 600-gram bags of frozen strawberries, thawed them out, and blended them up. While we were blending up the strawberries, we grabbed the cattails from the freezer and had a little nibble before thawing them out. Once we had a semi-puree of strawberries, we added it to our bucha, tasted it with the berries. Good, yummy, delicious. And then we tossed in our cattails. We sealed up the booch for the second fermentation and left it to ferment anaerobically, without oxygen, so that we could get that signature fizz to our kombucha. So now that we've begun the second fermentation, all we have to do is get it ready to bottle. At first, we wanted to try and buy some clear 355 milliliter beer-style bottles so that we could display the color of our bucha. We called a few homebrewing places around town, but no one really had any clear bottles. So with the suggestion from one of the homebrewing business owners, we went to the bottle depot to get our hands on some slightly used, clear glass beer bottles. The guy at the bottle depot said we could have them for free and told us to, quote, make some good beer. We picked the cleanest / best looking ones we could find, and then went home to take the labels off and sanitize them. Once we had all the bottles, we realized that cleaning them was going to take a long time and probably be very difficult since we could only really use a sink tap and Dawn soap. So we called Vernon Vinters and talked to Cheryl. We asked her if they had anything to help us clean our beer bottles. She said that we could come down and get our hands on some wine bottle cleaning supplies and a bucket, all for free. All we had to do was bring back the bucket. And when we were ready to bottle up our kombucha, we could even come use their industrial bottle cleaner. So once we got our supplies, we set up the cleaner and removed the labels of the bottles with hot water, making sure to scrub off all the glue and clean out any liquids left over. Then we soaked the bottles in 2 sets over 2 days to ensure that they would all be clean and usable. Once our second fermentation was finished, we headed down to Vernon Vinters and met with Cheryl. She let us give all our bottles a good and well needed clean in the industrial bottle washer. She gave us a siphon, an industrial capper, a filter to remove some pulp, a few containers to transfer our booch, a sweet locking funnel, and then put us to work. During the time we were there, she shared her mutual interest in kombucha making, taste tested our booch.
Oh. It's good. It's really good. I'm impressed.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And even showed us her little kombucha experiments. We were actually able to share some of our knowledge we learned along the way of the process of this project. Huge thanks to Cheryl for being a valuable mentor and a core piece in this project coming together.
Hello?
What do you want, Jasmine?
Where'd you hear that from? I think that would be nice. Hey, Jasmine. I brought you some food here. Yeah.
Hey Jasmine, you texted me to meet you. What's... Babe, where the fuck did you get that booch from?
I'm just a taste tester to you.
You know what? Ever since you've been around, my Scoby's vibes have been off. And I don't like that, and neither do my Scopes. I'm off.
Yeah, you know what? I don't want you hurting my Scoby either. Let's go, Carlos.
Hey man, sorry for hurting you. Actually, I didn't even know you guys were dating. Yeah. Would you, chance, let me have some of your booch?
Yes. I have a straw if you want.
I have a straw too.
Really?
Casey. Scoby. It's fantastic. The vibes. Whimsical.
I see the crystal raindrops fall, and the beauty of it all is when the sun comes shining through to make those rainbows in my mind when I think of you sometime, and I want to spend some time with you, just the two of us. we try